I'm Skylar Chilton, and my group chose Gender Disparities in Television and Coverage of Sports. And I started off with the background because, of course, it's the most important thing to get started with so everybody can open up to what they need to do. And so Title IX was the biggest thing because, and when it comes to like sports and education in general, Title IX was important because really it just, that opened the door for what the women can get into, so women can get into sports and sports coverage and things like that. Before Title IX, only 1 in 27 women or girls played high school sports, which is, I mean, that's a big deal. I mean, it's not very much at all. And there was pretty much practically no scholarships for women to play sports. Female athletes received about 2% of the overall budget for the whole school, which is a lot. I mean, 98% of it went to the male sports, so that shows how much importance was put on male sports compared to female. Post Title IX, after it went through and everything, there was a huge increase in participation in sports for women, and it was more equal distribution of that the budget towards women and men's sports. There were more opportunities. Like I said, there was more sports that women can play and get into, and women were less likely to abuse drugs or have unwanted pregnancies because they were able to get into these social things that guys were doing, like the sports and everything like that. And I mean, pretty much men just, in the past, men just saw women as inferior, like, when it comes to sports, which is just not true. It's just they try just as hard and their sports are just as entertaining. It's just they don't get the coverage that we do. So I'm going to hand it over to Christian here for the facts.
So while Title IX has improved the amount of opportunities that women have had to participate in sports, the rate of coverage hasn't kept up. And we have a few facts that can prove that. So for example, the Women's Tennis Association in December of 2014 signed the largest television contract in the history of women's sports. That was for $525 million over 10 years. Now, ESPN has a contract with Monday Night Football, the NFL, for $1.9 billion. That means ESPN makes twice as much in one game as the Women's Tennis Association makes over 2 years. Now, also coverage as far as the actual live sports, ESPN and other networks devote only 1.4% of its airtime towards coverage of women's sports. Also, ticker time is only 2.7% for women's sports. And that's a little bit easier to see up here in our graph, in our chart. In radio, men's sports get 95.1% of the coverage compared to just 1.4% for the women's. In television, it's 56.2% for the men and just 2% for the women. And in newspapers, it's 79.1% compared to just 10.7% for women. So here we have evidence. Hop in here.
Alright, so some of our evidence, some of the points we had was that more men watch, promote, and base their lives around sports. This was a source that we found online, and also more people support more men's sports than women's sports. So they obviously don't feel like it's fairly treated. It's been around longer, so more people have watched, played, and attended these games, which is also unfair to the women, which just adds to their discrimination that they feel. Men's sports are more popular and bring in more money when compared to women's also, which also just adds to the points above. Next we're going to do summary, so I'll hand this off to Zeb.
So to summarize this up, from this picture, you can tell it says women playing sports. You mean competitive dish cleaning as a joke. So as a summary, many women feel that their gender is discriminated when it comes to airtime on TV because obviously they just don't get as much time as they deserve, and also they are underreported when it comes to getting their sports covered. Also, the television sports news to focus regularly on women, but rarely on women's athletes. They focus more on looks, I would say, when it comes to broadcasting more than the sport itself, or maybe even the quality of the person, of the broadcaster. And that summarizes up this, and now I'm going to hand over the recommendations to Tyler.
Alright, I'm Tyler Young, and I got some list of recommendations to try to, well, first off, to limit some sexist comments like this picture demonstrate would be to fine commentators and anybody related to sports, journalists, or anything like that, for using sexist language like that. And also make broadcasting companies put out an effort to allow more female sports airtime. Maybe do a study, limit, levy out fines, FCC fines for not allowing the same amount of airtime, and get all the sports companies, broadcasting companies, to agree to in writing as a joint statement to allow more women's sports airtime. And then this is something I think would be a lot easier to set up. When gender is needed to distinguish one championship from another, like say in the NCAA, use the gender for both. So you have the women's Final Four, or you also have the men's Final Four. You don't just call the men's Final Four the Final Four. And that are my recommendations.